Jolie Nana recherche Jolie Joe. Comment on fait? Je suis pas très mytho. Manger le truc, je sens les pipeaux. Aya Nakamura. Oh yeah.
Hey guys, so it is third Saturday of the month, and as usual, we dissect a song. So what we're going to do here is this month, with it being Black History Month, I did want to promote some of my favorite Black artists, particularly for this song that I'm going to dissect today is from Aya Nakamura, Jolie Nana. Jolie Nana came out last summer and it was a bop. It still is in my mind. I love that song. It's so great. Yeah, so I love her music. She actually she's Malian born. She's born in Mali. Her birth name was Aya Nakamura. Now she just goes by Aya Nakamura. I think that's like mainly like the stage name, or kind of like the universal name that people know her by. But yeah, I know that now I think she's signed to Warner Music France, so I know that she's been located there, considering that I feel like that because like I follow her on Instagram and things like that, so I kind of see like where all these different, like, you know, all these different locations that she's at. So I believe that she's located in France. Okay, so we're gonna get started with that. So the first line of the song is Jolie Nana recherche Jolie Joe. So Jolie means pretty. So I think like Nana, it's like more like because we use that term from how I've like associated that word with, like, when we talk about mom, like motherly figures, or when we talk about like a nana, you know, nana, in the French pronunciation. So nana. So I think it's like a pretty mama searching for a pretty Joe, like a guy. So Joe, I looked this up. It's an African slang, and it's typically used amongst young people. But it basically is like a guy, like, oh, look at that Joe, you know. Yeah. And then the next line is comment on fait? Je suis pas très mytho. Comment on fait? This literally means how we do. Like, this literally is like, that's literally what it means. But I think it's more so in the context of like, how are we doing that? You know, I'm not very much of a myth. And then moi, j'ai le truc, je sens les pipeaux. Me, I have the thing. Le truc, I mean, I use this sometimes, but I see it really common, like, amongst, like, French artists. I actually, because I would watch, like, some interviews of, like, artists that I really like particularly Lompal, who we dissected his song about a few months ago. And I noticed that, like, every, like, once in a while, he would always say, le truc, le truc, le truc. Le truc is like a word of saying, like, it's like if you don't know how to describe something, it's kind of like the same way I use, like, quelque chose, like something, quelque chose comme ça, something like that. You know, just like things that you don't know what the names are. I think this is also a good word for, like, circumlocution. Like, when you don't know specifically what you're talking about, you can just say, like, oh, the thing, that thing over there, you know, or something like that. Yeah, it's really helpful because it can also trigger people to tell you what that actually is. It's like, oh, les trucs comme ça. Like, if I get, for example, if I didn't know how to say an orange or something like that, or what the fruit is, I'm like, le truc que je mange pour les vitamines C, like the thing that I eat for vitamin C, something like that. Okay, yeah. So I have the thing. I feel like, okay, je sens. Sentir can actually mean like can mean a couple of different things. It means like literally to feel, but it also like can mean like to sense something. Like it can mean like to hear something. So in this context, je sens les pipeaux. So obviously she's talking about hearing, because les pipeaux is like a flute, like a small flute, like, you know, piccolo. Les pipeaux. So it's like, I'm the thing. I like, basically, like, yeah, I am that. I have that thing. I hear les pipeaux, like the flutes. Yeah. And les pipeaux is basically, it can be a slang term that can mean like gibberish or like mumbo jumbo or like nonsense. It's like, yeah, like I'm hearing these flutes, like these high pitched flutes talking about whatever, but you know, so it's like les pipeaux, And ouais, I think I've talked about this in previous videos, but ouais is like the lazy form of saying oui. So it's like, oh, oui, ouais, ouais, you know, and it's spelled just like that. Okay, and then it's le pipeau again, and it says, and then it's, the first verse starts off with, tu ne vas pas me manquer, toi qui croyais me connaître. You are not going to miss me. Grammatically, this is kind of interesting because they use reflexive verbs and like saying like rather than saying tu ne veux pas manquer moi, like something like that, you use reflexive, so that's why it's me manquer. You're not going to miss me. Toi qui croyais me connaître. You who believes. Croyez, this is, I believe, is the, I want to say this is the imparfait version of this conjugation of this. So like croyez, like to saying like imparfait is like to describe like previous habits. Like you would use passé composé if you're talking about like one-time things that happened in the past, like j'ai mangé une orange, like yeah, I ate this orange. Or I mean, well, this is actually a cutie, but yeah, you know, you get what I'm saying. I ate this in the past, so that means in the past I did that one time because I can't eat this and then it happened again. Like if you were trying to say like I ate these like habitually in the past, then you can use imparfait. But basically imparfait is to say like things in the past that you have constantly been, that is like a habit. So like if I was saying like I get up at like if I was talking about in the past, like I got up at 6 in the morning, let's say that's like a habit, then you would use that in the imparfait. But if you're saying like this morning I got up at 6, then that would be passé composé because you did that this morning one time. You didn't wake up at 6 in the morning multiple times in the morning because, you know, you're limited by that time. So I hope that makes sense. So imparfait. Toi qui croyais me connaître. You who believes that you know me. So it's like, you're not going to miss me. You keep, like, you who believes that you know me. And connaître is different from savoir. Connaître means that you are familiar with someone. Like, you know, like, it's the difference between, like, saying, like, I know that Jazz is 23 years old versus saying, like, oh, I know Jazz, that Jazz has a habit of doing certain things in the past. You know, it's like, you know, it's one thing to know, like, facts about me, like, for example, my age. But it's one thing to say, like, oh, I know Jazz, like, she has a habit of doing this, you know, she has a habit of taking excessive notes, you know, on online courses. Yeah, I could show you this stack of notes. You know, like, it's one thing to be familiar with someone, you know, one thing to know factual information about someone, but connaître means, like, I know you, like, I'm familiar with you, like, you know, in that sense. Right? And then the next line is, t'es rempli de charabia, tu ne sauras plus rien de nu moi. Okay. So, t'es rempli means you are full. Rempli can mean like full of anything. Like it can be like you're replenished, or if you're talking about like this. Like let's say you're trying to say that this is full of liquid. C'est rempli de liquide. De la liquide. Something like that. So you can use that in that sense to say like you are full of nonsense. Charabia is basically gibberish. Like just you're full of BS, you know. And that's the G version of what I'm trying to say, you know. I think I got my notes mixed up. Les pipeaux actually basically means like lies. So it's like hearing sound like the lies. I'm hearing lies. And then charabia is gibberish and mumbo jumbo. So it's like you were full of BS. Tu ne sauras plus rien de moi means you will not know the new me anymore. So this is one of the reasons why I tell people never to translate things literally, because grammar structures are different in other languages. And don't get me started in German, you know. So saura, and also we don't pronounce less letters in French typically. So this is actually the future tense of savoir. So it means you, like plus rien means like anymore. It means you will not know me anymore. You will not anymore know the new me. And it's interesting that there's like, sometimes in French, you'll kind of see like, or French songs, I've seen like certain, like sometimes they'll put like English words in there. So you'll see like du new moi, like of the new me. So you will not know anymore. Like it's like saying, when you see the new me, you will not know who I am anymore. Like you will not know, you will not recognize me, you know. Je ne peux pas supporter d'oser me comparer. Okay, it's saying I cannot, ne pas. Basically, anytime you know this, something is being negated. There's going to be a ne and before the verb, the conjugated verb, and then a pas afterwards. Also in speech, sometimes you can use like, you can take off the ne, as long as one of them is there in your speech, it's important. When you're texting, sometimes people will say, like, they'll use one of the other, like, it's common to say, like, je peux pas, like, because when you're speaking, you're trying to get, you know, you're typically speaking at a quicker pace, and sometimes you will drop off certain things, like certain letters, or sometimes words that, that kind of don't make sense. You know what I mean? Like, when you're writing formally in French, you want to say, je ne veux pas, je ne peux pas. But you don't want, I mean, but in colloquial dialect where it's like you're amongst familiar people, or in songs are very informal, then you're more than welcome to just drop something off, you know, like, I mean, even in English, we don't speak in proper grammar. I'm gonna be honest with you. Yeah. So it says you cannot support, supporter, and then t'as osé me comparer. So it says you have dared to compare me. Yeah. Okay. You cannot support. You've dared to compare me. Also in past composé, typically what happens is this, that you use the verb avoir and they conjugate that to what. That's why it's ta. Typically, if you're writing this out formally, it would be tu as, but because this is written as it's spoken, it's going to sound like ta. T'as osé me comparer. T'inquiète pas, je vais tout niquer, c'est la putain de vie, de life. Okay, so t'inquiète pas, it's actually, you can use it on its own. T'inquiète pas basically means don't worry about it, like forget it. You know, it's like if someone like apologizes for bumping into you, most likely, you know, it's by accident. So most people are going to say, oh, don't worry about it. Like, oh, t'inquiète pas. Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna also, now that I'm getting to this part, there's some slight vulgarity here, like in terms of language, not in terms of like the context, but it's just more so, it's just the words. So, t'inquiète pas, je vais tout niquer. It says I'm going to, okay, niquer is another way of saying, and I don't know if you were paying attention when I did the Dissect song for Immortel with, by Maître Guim. So, niquer is like another word of saying like, it's a obscene word. It's a word for, it's an obscenity that basically is referring to sexual intercourse. You kind of, there's niquer, I've heard like Romeo Elvis, he's used that word in his songs before. You can hear like baiser, you'll hear like foudre, they all relatively mean the same thing. You know, it just depends on the context of how you use it. So it's like, don't worry about it. I'm going to like tear everything up. You know, like, I feel like, you know, when you use the F word in the English language, there's so many different ways you can use it. Whereas like for here, there's just like, there's so many different words to say one thing. In English, we use the same word in different contexts, but for them, they have so many different words that we use one word for. Okay. So it's saying, it's like basically, don't worry about it. I'm gonna kill it. Like, I'm gonna mess everything up. Okay. Je fais tout niquer. C'est la putain de vie, de life. Okay, this is so confusing because it's like life, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, that's English. You know. So putain is like an adjective typically, but sometimes it also can be used as a noun. So, but basically, putain is also another word of saying like the F word, but like in context of like, it's like, I don't know, like the messed up life. It's like, I don't really know how to like directly translate this word for word, but in context and interpreting, c'est la putain de life. It's like, you know what? Forget about it. I'm gonna mess everything up. It's kind of like it's you know, it's like that's like the crappy part of life. You know, it's like, oh, it is what it is. And then it goes into mais qui va se négliger? Okay, it says, but who is going to neglect themselves? And this is also reflexive. That's why it's se négliger versus, you know, like saying like, you know, rather than like, if it's négliger by itself, then it means like to neglect. But se négliger means you neglect yourself. Something reflexive verbs is when you do something to yourself, versus when you use it without the reflexive, it means that something else is doing that, you know. So it says, but who's going to neglect themselves? And then in parentheses, it says, pas moi. It means not me. Je vais pas me négliger. I'm not going to neglect myself. Si c'est fini, c'est la vie, vie. Okay, so it means if it's finished. Okay, so also fini. Finir, typically in the passé composé, is going to be used with avoir. So it would be j'ai fini. Like if you're finishing your dinner, like, or this orange, which I keep referring to. It's like, oh, I finished this orange. Then it would be j'ai fini. J'ai fini. C'est orange. Yeah, I finished it. But then when you use it with avoir to say like je suis fini, or c'est fini, it means, or like, you know, il est fini. It means like finished, like permanently. Like someone explained that to me. A French person explained that to me. They said if you say like j'ai fini, it's like, oh, like you finished something, like you did something and you finished it. Like, oh, like, you know, I finished my exam. J'ai fini mon examen. Like I finished something. But when you're saying like if you say je suis fini, it means like I'm finished. You know, it's kind of like if you get fired from a job and the person is like, you're finished, I'm gonna ruin your reputation, you're never gonna work in this industry ever again. It's like, oh, I'm finished, like I'm ruined. So it's like if it's ruined, if it's done, that's life. C'est la vie, vie. Bientôt j'aurai tout zappé. Bientôt, it means like soon. Like you can say like à bientôt to someone, which means à bientôt means see you soon. À bientôt. And then j'aurai tout zappé. Okay, j'aurai, this, I believe this is the past conditional version of avoir. J'aurai basically means like I would, like I could, like zap everything. And zappe is like a verb that can mean like to change course or to forget about something. It's like, oh, it's life, that's how it is. It's like soon I could forget about it. And then it says j'ai dit oui. Okay, so which means I said yes. So it means like, so basically it's like, who's gonna, well, in this case, I think this is kind of like a breakup song. It's kind of like a, you know, because it came out during the summer, and it's like, you know what, like, you did this crap, I'm looking for someone who can treat me this way. It's like, who's gonna neglect themselves? It's not gonna be me. If it's finished, like if this relationship is done, that's life, that's how it goes. Soon I could forget everything. So it's like, in time, I'm gonna forget it, because, you know, and I said yes, and then it repeats the first verse. Jolie Nana recherche joli jour. Comment on fait? Je suis pas très mytho. Moi j'ai le truc. Je sens les people. Ouais, les people. Oh yeah. And then it goes into il m'a rendu bête. Okay, il m'a rendu bête. So like there's a phrase in French where we say like rendre fou, which means like to render foolish. So like there's a song by Maître Guim. It's called Caméléon. A very good song. I'll link that below. You guys need to listen to it. You know, Caméléon, where he talks about, there's a part in the lyrics where he says, il me rendre fou, which means like it renders me foolish. So when something renders you foolish, like in this case, il m'a rendu bête. Bête means like silly or like stupid. So it's like, I think in this kind of like ideology, she's basically saying like, I'm gonna find a real Joe, I'm gonna find a real guy, and, you know, he's gonna render me foolish. Like, you know, like when you're in love and you're like, he makes me like, you know, I feel like it's like when a person kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like, I'm going to be in love with him and I'm going to basically like, I don't know, he's going to basically render me silly. If that makes sense. Like, yeah, it's like, il m'a rendu bête, bête, bête. Je suis tombée la première, merde, merde. Okay, so he's going to render me foolish. Render me silly. I am going to fall, like I fell number one. La première means first. So he makes me silly and he puts me number one. I fell as number one in his book, And then it's merde, merde, merde. And typically most people know what merde is, okay? So, il m'a rendu bête, bête, bête. Je suis tombée de la première, merde, merde. Okay, so yeah, so the second verse, it says, si t'as les critères, ça me va. So if you have the criteria, ça me va. Like that goes to me. Like, yeah. So it's like, if you have the criteria, that comes to me, or that goes to me. Je suis pas dans les délires de vice. I am not in les délires. Think of délire as like delirious, as we use in English. Délire, like, it can mean like delirium, frenzy, excitation. So it's like, I'm not like, in another way I think of saying, it's like, I'm not in this whole sort of delirium of like, I'm not in this whole naivety. Like, it's like, if you have the criteria that goes to me, that goes to me, or that I'm looking for, I mean, in a basic translation, I'm not in excitation or frenzy. Vice is like weaknesses or deviousness in certain contexts. But it's like, I'm not in the delirium of vices or weakness or whatever. And to be honest with you, I'm going to have to say this, is that Aya Nakamura, if any of you have seen some of her music videos or listened to any of her songs, she's not a very weak person, as you can kind of see. She's like saying, these are my criteria. If you meet them, we'll see. I'm not in any hurry. I'm not in a frenzy. I'm not in this like, mentality of I need to find a man, that kind of context. Si tu penses assurer, c'est bon. It's like, if you think in assurance, it's good. Tu peux déposer ton CV par mail. Okay, so déposer can actually mean a couple different things. It can mean like to drop off something. It can mean to deposit something. Again, it depends on the context. So what she's saying is, tu peux déposer ton CV. CV, it means like curriculum vitae, which is like a Latin word for like resume. So in America, we say, oh, send me your resume. But in Europe, typically, they were like, oh, m'envoyer ton CV. Like, send me your CV. So I'm pretty sure if you work with anyone international, or you've kind of come across that, or if you've never heard of that, a CV or a CV is basically a resume. So it's like, if you have the criteria that goes with me, I am not in any frenzy or any hurry or, of weakness or something like that. If you think that you ensure that it's good, that you're good, that that you fulfill these criterias, then you can send me, you can send your CV by mail. Okay. And then it goes again, it says, mais qui va se négliger? Je vais pas me négliger. And then from there, it basically repeats, and then until, repeats all that I just talked about until we get to the bridge, which basically says, Cheval, t'es bien comment, mais Cheval, t'as bien comment, mais je vous, c'est mort. It's so confusing to say this because, like, it's written as it's spoken. So, like, I'm like, all these letters are dropped off. Okay, cheval basically is like a slang term for a child. You have, okay, kuma. Kuma is also another word that has African origin. It basically is another way to say parler or raconter. Parler means to speak, and raconter means to tell. So it's like, it says if you have well spoken, but I confess that it's dead. Toi, tu fous la merde, tu veux que j'avoue mes torts, lol. Okay, so So it's like saying like, child, you have spoken, if you have spoken well, but I have to admit or have to confess. Avouer is basically another way of saying like to admit, to confess something. It's like, but I have to confess like that it's dead. Like, it's like, yeah, you've spoken really well, but you're dead. This is dead. It's dead. It says, toi, tu fous la merde. So again, like I said, with a little bit of like vulgar terms, I wouldn't say, this is more like another way of saying like kind of like F this. You know, it's like it's like if you've spoken well and it's dead, then you can go with that BS. We don't know what la merde is, so it's like basically like saying like, it's like if you've spoken well and I have to confess I think this is dead, then you can go with that BS, you know. Tu veux que j'avoue les torts. So it says, I want that I want to like I want that I confess my wrongs. LOL. It's like I want to confess that I do have faults. Like it's like a kind of saying I want to confess that I'm imperfect and I have flaws. Like I think because tort, like if you wanted to say like if, for example, like if you're trying to say that you're correct about something, like saying like I'm right, like I wouldn't say like I am right. Like in French I would say j'ai raison, I have reason. So it's like, oh, like it's like le ciel est bleu, the sky is blue. Oh, t'as raison, you have reason. You know, but it's like tort means is like the opposite of raison. So it's like something like I have wrongs, or you can say I have faults, I have flaws. Okay. Yeah. Also, like now that I think about it, when you use the word like when she's talking about the word like toi tu fous, fou comes from like the word foudre, which I talked about earlier, which is kind of like it's kind of like another way of saying like the F word, but it's more so as like if you're trying to tell someone to like go away. You know, there's a way of saying, like, you can also use it in the context of saying qu'est-ce que tu fous, which basically means what the hell are you doing, you know, kind of like that. It's kind of like more of like a rude way of saying that. Not that I'm trying to teach you guys curse words, but I think that it's really important if case it comes up, because, you know, I would hate to be like sitting there and someone's being rude to me and I don't know it, and then they're like, you know, I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, I mean, there are going to be cases where people are going to possibly could be talking about you. It's not common, because I usually know that, like, a lot of people say they really don't talk about other people unless they're just kind of, like, you know, gossiping people, which there are in the world. They're not unicorns. They exist. But, yeah, I mean, you're, especially, like, when you're amongst friends, especially young people, is that it's common to use language, you know. In formal situations, obviously, you should never use this. But, you know, in certain, like, occasions, like, if you're hanging around, like, friends and they're talking about things going on, you're most likely going to hear some of these, you know, this kind of language. And it's really not uncommon. Like, particularly in French culture, there's certain things that in America we're, like, taboo about, where it's like, oh, like, talking about sex, which is normal for them. It's like, it's not taboo. It's okay to openly talk about it, you know, if that makes sense. In America, it may not always be that way. Yeah, I think it's probably because, like, they have such a history with, like, all this, like, art and humanism. So if you're an art history buff, you probably are familiar what I'm talking about with humanism. So it's like, for them, it's like, this is a common thing. Like, why are you so afraid to talk about human things? You know? You know, yeah. So there's that. And then the next part is mais à qui tu vas le faire? Moi, j'ai le mental. So it says, but to who you are going to do, like, to who are you going to do, it's, in context, like, overall, like, just to make this make sense to English speakers. So it's basically, like, so, like, à qui tu vas le faire, like, what do you, okay, so, to what are you going to do? Qui literally means who, or whom, but sometimes in certain cases, depending on the subject of what you're talking about, but, like, it's kind of like saying, but what are you going to do? Mais à qui tu veux la faire? So what are you gonna do about it? I think that's basically what I see. Moi, j'ai le mental. Like, me, I have the mental. Like, this is another instance where English words show up in foreign songs. But it's like, moi, j'ai le mental. Like, I have the mentality. Like, what are you going to do about it? Like, I have the mentality. But what are you going to do? Ouais, à qui tu vas la faire? Et qui est qui? Yeah, to what are you going to do? And it says, retour à la réalité, return to reality. Moi, je retourne à la réalité. I'm returning to reality. Ouais, j'ai le mental, à qui tu vas le faire. It repeats again. And then, Jolie Nana, recherche les jours. And it goes on again until the end of the song. So, fairly short, as you know. But I think that this is such a great song to me because I think it's a really good song for self-confidence. Despite the fact that there are some, like, words that are a little inappropriate. And like I said, like in America, like I said, there are certain words that, I mean, this is kind of like common language to kind of hear, like on a, I wouldn't say like on a regular basis, but it's kind of common to hear in conversations, like when you're talking to your friends about, oh, look, you know, this guy, he dumped me, or this guy, you know, I dumped him because he's not, he you know, he keeps doing this, that, and the other, you know, when you talk about it, it's like, oh, you know, girl, you know, you need to, you know, it's like, you need to find yourself somebody who blah, blah, blah. It's common to like talk like that in like colloquial situations. And I think that in school, typically we teach like formal speech, but it's like, let's say if you're moved to another country, and you can also check out our Saturday talk from 2 weeks ago with Sonia Bahala about moving to a foreign country and her perspective on first impressions and her experience with learning the language and things like that, is when you move to another country, you're not going to be subjected to formal dialogue all the time. So you need to really be able to decipher, okay, like, this is common to hear. Like, you're in a conversation, let's say you're with coworkers, or when you're, you know, in a very informal setting and you're hearing people throwing around all this dialogue that you've never heard before, it's going to make it a little bit harder for you to kind of adjust. So this is very common to kind of hear in certain cases. Especially because in France, particularly, there is a lot of diversity, particularly because you have a lot of people who come from African descent, kind of like Aya Nakamura, where there are a lot of African French-speaking countries. So a lot of times they're going to migrate to countries that speak the same language. You know, it's like if I grew up speaking French in Morocco, why would I go to the United States that speaks primarily English? You know, I'm going to go to France because, first of all, it's easy to cross the Mediterranean Ocean and get there. You know, if it makes sense when it comes to, I mean, also there's all different kinds of circumstances. I know that Mali, last time I remember, I think there was a civil war going on. Same thing with Maître Guim. He's from the Democratic Republic of Congo. So I know there's like dictatorships and things like that. So people move for different reasons, but they're typically going to migrate to countries where a language is spoken that they have in common. Oh, that makes sense. And one of the things I love about the song is not only is it like very much empowering, because it's talking about like not putting up with BS. And if you guys know that I think you guys who know me personally, I'm very much single by choice, and it's because I have standards. And she talks about that throughout the song. I mean, and I think that that's something that it's more so it's like, you know, yeah, if you have the criteria, yeah, I'll hear you out, but I'm not gonna, but just so you know, je suis pas dans les délires de vice. But just so you know, I'm not in a hurry, I'm not in a frenzy to be in a relationship with someone that I really am not impressed with. You know, if that makes sense. And I think that every woman or anyone who's in a relationship, it doesn't have to be like male or female, it's that you shouldn't have to put up with someone who's not meeting your standards. You know, I mean, there's one thing, you know, there's one thing for people to have imperfections. You know, for my thing is, I know for a fact I have a lot of paranoia, and a lot of it's not like relationship paranoia, it's just sometimes like paranoia where I'm very hyper vigilant about being in dangerous situations, you know, and a lot of that kind of comes from like previous traumatic events that I've kind of gone through. But I mean, like, I'm gonna be honest with you, everyone has flaws, but it's like, as long as like, if you're meeting the criteria where you're always, let's say like my criteria, just as an example, is, you know, I want someone who's going to support what I do. Obviously, this is something, you know, MMP is something that I've been growing for a while, for about 2 years now, almost 2 years actually. And so I'm like, this is something that's important to me, and I don't want to be in a relationship with someone who's going to stunt my growth. You know, like when you look at, and now that we live in a world where we have a woman as a vice president, we have the very first second gentleman. So it's more so as like, I'm going to tell you right now, guys, it's not emasculating. You can go talk to Justin Baldoni, you know, you know, the guy who's the expert on the topic of man enough. You know, you can go talk to him. Is that it is, there's nothing, at least in my opinion, as a female who is very, very ambitious, there's nothing more attractive than someone who's like, yeah, babe, I love that you're doing something, you know, worldly. I love that you're doing something to, you know, to better society or do something like that. You know, I think there's nothing really more attractive, at least in my book, of someone who's supporting what I do. Not only supporting what I do, but also being actively involved. Like, that's a big deal. So, and especially because we live in a different world now where we don't have to be required to, we're not required to be housewives all day. You know, we can actually have our own lives. So, and I love that. I love how she says, mais qui va se négliger? Pas moi. Je vais pas me négliger. I'm not neglecting myself. I'm not neglecting my standards. I'm not gonna, and then, you know, when she says, and as much as it's like, you know, it's not pleasant to, it's not a pleasant thing to say, but when she says, je vais ta bien comme, mais je veux que c'est mort. Toi, tu fous la merde. Tu veux que j'avoue mes torts. Like, when she says that, it's like, get out of here with this BS. I'm not here for that. And I think that that's just a standard that everyone should really have, is that you shouldn't put up with things because I want to be in a I really want to be in a relationship. I'm going to tell you right now, I know so many people, I know people who are single, who've said, I've never been in a relationship. I've always wanted, I'm like, I'm going to be honest with you. I've never been in a relationship in my life. I mean, I've been in things that are not serious, things like that. But I mean, I've never been in a serious relationship, but I'm not sitting around thinking, oh, I just really want a boyfriend. I really want to, yeah, it's like, girls, don't go down that path, because the moment that, like, you feel that way, then you're gonna start falling for the first person that comes into your life, and that's not the best thing. The first thing that comes in your life may not be the best thing. So the best thing is just to wait for the blessings to come, you know, be yourself, do some things. So, but I think that's the main thing I admire the most about Aya Nakamura's music, is that she's very much about confidence. She's very much about, I think in terms of like, just as, you know, the idea of like, you know, the strong black woman is like, you know, I'm not, you know, I'm going to tell you right now, and Wanda Sykes will tell you, black women don't play. We don't, you know, so it's like, you need to get you need to get yourself in gear. Otherwise you can hit the road. So I hope that this basically was enjoyable for you, and I hope you were able to learn not only some French, but also some some African origin words. And I hope you got some cultural insights. So I will see you next month on this series with Dissect a Song. So I will link the music video below, because you need to see it. And I will also link my Spotify list that's on our website. You can find all of my recommended French songs. I also recommended earlier that song Chameleon from Metroyim. These are some of my favorite artists, who are obviously my favorite black artists, who are, to be honest with you, like the best. At least I think so. So I'll talk to you next month.